A day after National Signing Day, we will talk a little about National Signing Day. Of course, Ohio State had its class all wrapped up. That's 20 signees. That's 5 transfer players until we hit the May portal period here for the Buckeyes and the rest of the nation. This is Buckeyes Live right here at the Voice of College Football featuring Tony Gerdeman. Buckeye Huddle, Buckeye Weeklies, his podcast, also his new platform here on YouTube. Check it out, College Football Playbook. Kevin Noon down below from Buckeye Huddle as well, and the Big Me podcast. Guys, how we doing today?
Good.
Doing great.
All right, Tony, you met with how many coaches for how long yesterday?
Well, Ryan Day started the morning off for an hour, and then it was the 10 assistants and 11th assistant, James Laurinaitis, and then also Mark Pantoni, the recruiting director. So was that 13 people for the span of about 3 hours yesterday. So, yes, we are chock full of knowledge and ready to spew it at anybody who asks.
Spew away, then. I'm not even going to ask questions. I want your impressions, your high points, your most meaningful notes.
Well, you mentioned in the tweet teaser about play calling, and this was the first time I felt like Ryan Day may actually give up play calling, just based on the way he talked about how kind of hamstrung he was towards the end of the season, because you've got so many other things that you're dealing with. And you know, at that point, you're also talking about player retention and your self-scouting, all of these other things. It felt like he would like to have play calling off of his plate. I think he's just going to have to reconcile that desire when in October, November, with the desire to call plays in August and September. Like, I don't know if those two things can mix well. So he said he's going to give Brian Hartline the opportunity this spring to call plays. I feel like this might be heading to actually Ryan Day giving up the plays. I know I might be in the minority on that one. We'll find out.
Yeah, I felt that it was really interesting as well, with the whole comment, because you know the way I kind of took it was, well, if spring doesn't go so well in terms of that, does he pull back on the reins a little bit? It's like, I think I'm going to do this. So, you know, I think that's one of the biggest, most tangible things we can take out of it. Kind of moving away from the Ryan Day situation. We were kind of talking about this a little before we went live on the air. Mark Pantoni, we had the chance to talk to him, as Tony had mentioned, and comments about the amount of time that they spend in the portal. They have a full-time person who that's his job. His job is to focus solely on the portal. Pantoni went on to say that he watches film 8-9 hours a day, which I don't doubt at all. That's, he kind of created a position in the college football world. Everybody else is kind of caught up and created that type of position. And Mark Pantoni has kind of stayed ahead of everybody in terms of what it takes there. But the most interesting thing is, in this day and age of NIL, if a kid is too NIL focused, if it's just all about the money, my words, not his words, if it's all about the money, they may pull out, from recruiting a kid, because, Ohio State certainly has NIL opportunities. But at least of this day, February 2nd, 2023, Ohio State is not front-loading kids as they come in and paying them to enroll. And I think that some people will be interested in seeing if a kid, a high-profile, a top 15, top 25 type of kid, is not being recruited by Ohio State, or suddenly is stopped being recruited by Ohio State, what people are going to think of that. And I think that there's going to be very real instances, because you only have so many hours that you can put into this. So they haven't invented a 25th hour of the day. So if a kid is all about the money, again, my words, and Ohio State is not playing that game, why sink a lot of time in that kid? You can only convince them for so long. Yeah, you could sit there and go for the short-term windfall, or you could go for the long-term payday. And we have a we at Ohio State have this record of developing kids, and not only are we going to get you into the league, but as long as you keep working and hold up your end of the bargain, get you to a second contract where you create generational wealth. If a kid wants that short-term payday, probably not the best fit at Ohio State.
Yeah, I would echo everything these guys just said. I think that certainly Ohio State's trying to stay at the forefront and compete with Georgia and Alabama and the teams at the top, trying to drag the Big Ten along, kicking and screaming into this modern era. Very telling. I think a lot of comments made that the Big Ten only signed 2 5-star players, and both of them are to Ohio State. With what was it, Carnell Tate and Brandon Ennis, the 2 wide receivers. Correct me if I'm wrong, guys. I think that's what it was.
Right. That's right.
So the Big Ten's losing this battle, and for the best players. And it's not like they've always signed a ton of 5-star players anyway. But I think in this new era, it's even exacerbated a little bit more. So if Ohio State wants to compete for national championships, then certainly, they're going to have to compete on the front end for the top players and the top prospects and the best transfer portal players and everything else. To me, it looks like they did a bang-up job in the transfer portal. This Davison Igbenison, who transferred this week, started 10 games at Ole Miss as a freshman. Didn't start 3 games late in the season. He kind of maybe hit a wall there. Plus, they started playing some better teams, and obviously, Ole Miss went downhill after a 7-0 start. But I think that looks like they got some guys that can help them right away between him and Jihad Carter and also Victor Cutler, the offensive lineman we talked about from Louisiana Monroe. Don't let the previous school fool you. It sounds like this is a guy who they think could be either an interior lineman, perhaps at center, or if they don't have anybody else, he could maybe play tackle as well. So just kind of up in the air on that. But I thought yesterday was very good. We got a chance to talk to all the assistants as well as Mark Pantoni, the recruiting coordinator, James Laurinaitis, the new graduate assistant in charge of the linebacker group, it sounds like, and Ryan Day, obviously the head coach. He spoke for 45 minutes yesterday, covered a lot of good topics, I thought.
Hey, Steve, just to extend on your point about the 5 stars, I just did a quick run through the 247 rankings, 28 for the SEC if you add them all up, 28 for the SEC, 2 for the Big Ten.
And none for any other conference, or?
No, I didn't go through the other conferences. I just wanted to make that SEC Big Ten comparison. 28-2, 2 for the Buckeyes. Speaking of the cornerback who comes in from Ole Miss, in Igbenison, however we will get the correct pronunciation on that at some point. I tell you, go to Tony's Twitter page. He did yeoman's work breaking down the film on this guy, Tony.
Yeah, and so I grabbed pretty much like every snap that involved him and some that didn't, just because he's in the picture, against Kentucky, LSU, and Texas Tech. And there's highlights, there's lowlights, and these aren't highlights. They're just clips. And so when a lot of the Buckeye fans go on Twitter to watch it, they're expecting huddle highlights. They're expecting, these are all of the good plays. It's like, no, these are just all of the plays. And so there's some missed tackles, there's a pass interference, there's blown coverages, but there's also tackles and PBUs, and it's the ups and downs of being a cornerback, being a freshman cornerback, being a starting freshman cornerback in the SEC. And so I think it was jarring for some people to see, like, you're expecting nothing but positive plays, and that's not reality. That's Hollywood. That's huddle. And so, I don't think he's an immediate starter. I think he's going to compete I don't think he's just penciled in. I think he's going to compete with Jordan Hancock and Jair Brown to be the starting corner opposite Denzel Burke. And even talking to Tim Walton yesterday, he's like, Denzel Burke is a returning starter. That's fact. That doesn't mean he's the starter this year. So It's going to be open competition. I expect Denzel Burke to be one of those, and the other three will compete to be that number 2. And then, there's I think they're going to rotate. And with Davis and Igbinosun, when he was starting last year, he also rotated. So he would come out of the game quite a bit. And then when, as Steve said, he kind of hit a wall, and I think that's exactly what happened down the stretch. He didn't really rotate back in as much as the other guys did when he was starting. But then for the bowl game, he was back in the starting lineup and did okay. But he's a guy with 10 starts under his belt now, and now he's on your team. And so that's a huge addition just to have that experience. Even if he doesn't win the job, he's a guy. Look, they had 5 guys who started at cornerback last year for Ohio State. That's not supposed to happen. And so now you've got another guy that can step up if something goes wrong or if he just actually wins the job.
Yeah, and you have to like the fact, too, that he's going to get to go up against Ohio State's wide receivers, Marvin Harrison Jr., Emeka Egbuka, et cetera, in practice. And that's going to go a long way in terms of his development. So whatever he gets in terms of development, working with Tim Walton, but then going against Ohio State's receivers and going against Ohio State's scheme, all of that is going to help him in his own personal development, and whether or not that development leads him into a starting role, a co-starting role, a first guy off the bench role, whatever it may be. This is a guy that has 3 more years of eligibility. This was not an immediate stopgap. We're putting somebody in because of some recruiting shortfalls. There probably were still some recruiting shortfalls. I mean, obviously losing Ja'Kalen Johnson to LSU in the transfer portal, et cetera, et cetera. But, this is somebody that you are investing in because he has the potential of being here a couple more years. And, if he's as good as everybody hopes he is, then he's only going to be at Ohio State for 2 more years and then he can go off to the draft. But this isn't a stopgap. We know that this guy is going to be our guy and that he's going to get out there year 1, do what is needed, and then there's not going to be any question about him returning. He's off to the NFL.
Also, to highlight this from the other side is what Tony put together and what these guys provide. And I'm talking to all of you out there that watch us on a regular basis, because I know I'm running around trying to keep these channels afloat with everything that I do. But the deep dive that these guys do on a regular basis, whether it's Kevin's tale of the tape and probably 52 other things that I'm not aware of, what Tony did with that, I was glued to that, Tony. I kept going to every clip, because again, it wasn't a huddle reel. It was, okay, this is, you get the good and the bad, you get everything. There it is. And you just have to appreciate that as a college football fan, as an Ohio State fan, what Steve does on a regular basis. So please lock in on these guys. They do a phenomenal work on their platforms.
The other thing, the interesting thing from those clips is to see it's a pretty odd defense that Ole Miss runs, that they have a freshman cornerback. Sometimes he's a couple yards away. Sometimes he's 11 yards off the line of scrimmage. Sometimes he's not even defending somebody. He's more of a kind of a safety. So I think that was also a lot to ask of a true freshman, rather than just, hey, line up against the guy across from you and just clamp him down.
I wanted to hit again a couple treetop perspectives on the 2 headline topics we brought forth from Pantone and from Ryan Day / Brian Hartline. So to the play calling, I think I'm on the same page with Kevin. If I understood where he was coming from in regards to, my initial reaction was, I'm surprised that Day was that specific. I thought he would be more vague in terms of, this is an ongoing evaluation. It does make it sound like the interpretation is going to be, well, if Ryan Day comes out after spring practice and says, or at some point in the summer and says, I'm going to be the play caller again this season, that Brian Hartline just didn't do a good job of calling plays in whatever their simulation was. That was my reaction to that. The Pantone part of it is, obviously, I got to think that average Buckeye fan out there is going to come away from that thinking, we're not competing, we can't compete. That's going to be the response, because he also made a comment in there, and I think Kevin hit on it, that this is going to make us more regionally based or regionally focused. And we know that there are really good players in every region, and also the Midwest included, but not as many.
I think also you just look at Texas A&M as this cautionary tale. A bunch of guys that went for the money, and then how many leave. And so I have no problem with Ohio State sticking to their guns. Like, if that is the most important thing to you, go find that somewhere else. There are more important things to Ohio State than providing a 17-year-old with as much money as he would like. It's, as you keep saying, it's the culture thing. But also, Ryan Day said in the next couple of months, he feels pretty good that they're going to be in a position to where they're going to have good footing in terms of, and he didn't say it specifically, but I think the question was about the NIL in recruiting. And he said he felt pretty good that in the next couple of months, they're going to be in a good spot there as well. So it sounds like to me, that's coming. Like money to recruits is coming. Just in what form and how quickly. And I can't believe we're just talking like that.
Didn't the Jaden Rashada situation with Florida just outline what's wrong with this whole situation? Did that not just shine a spotlight on that's not supposed to be the way it's done? It's not an inducement. It's not supposed to be. It is certainly a conversation piece to say, this is our NIL collective. This is what we have available to you. This is how we've helped others. All those things in terms of a conversation, and to show off the university in that way, but not to say, here's the contract, sign it, 13 million, and this is what it's going to be.
Before 65 miles an hour on the berm or on the highway is the speed limit, but what about on the berm? You never said anything about on the berm. So we're gonna try and paint the corners as much as we can. And let's remember, he was going to allegedly get $6 million at Miami, $7 million at Florida or whatever, and ends up at Arizona State, a program that had all of its own issues in terms of how it was recruiting, and it created a major change in terms of all of its coaching there. But yeah, A&M is very much a cautionary tale. The Jaden Rashada situation, and you have to wonder. I mean, how many generational talents end up panning out and being generational talents? And now that if you're having to sit there and put a significant chunk of your resources, and I say that in way of that NIL collectives are separate from the university, so I'm not saying that the universities are directing anything, at least not in the school that I cover. I can't speak for other places. And you're putting it all in on there. Plus, too, you're setting a price. So when Florida goes and recruits its next quarterback and says, where's my $13 million? I mean, that's got to be the entry price. So I mean, and I'm better than that guy, and the dollar's probably worse in terms of the economy. So I should probably be worth 15 million, whether or not there's any truth to it or not, of how that whole situation works. So it's a very dangerous game that is being played here. But I will say this: I'm not anti kids being compensated for what it is, the dollars that they bring in. This isn't, get off my lawn, some angry old man who couldn't play football, who is angry at the kids who can. I just think that we have really opened a Pandora's box with absolutely no regulation whatsoever, and it's going to get worse before it gets better.
No
Steve's
doubt.
here, and he didn't get his formal introduction. That's, of course, Steve Hellwagon, 247 Sports Bucknuts. Get on over there, check out Steve's work. And, of course, Steve's here every week for us, typically on Wednesday, National Signing Day this year, of course, on Wednesday, as it always is, the first week of February. We are here on Thursday. Steve, I opened this up by just giving the floor to Tony and Kevin concerning whatever their most notable and meaningful impressions of meeting with the coaches this week.
Yeah, I was also there yesterday through the 45 minutes with Coach Day and all the assistant coaches. I listened in on Justin Fry, the offensive line coach, which I think is one of the huge issues facing this team going into 2023. You lose both of your tackles, DeJuan Jones and Paris Johnson. As a side plot, our people have gotten word that apparently DeJuan Jones showed up yesterday, dominated everybody at the Senior Bowl practice, got all this social media run, and may have gone AWOL after one day. It's kind of like got in, made his point, and then GTFO. Like I am no longer going to sit around here and play with you any longer. I'm out the door. So I don't know. Kevin says he knows more about the DeJuan situation.
Yeah, I mean, it was quickly, and then let you get back to your point.
Yeah, get back to what I was going to say about the coaches, but go ahead.
He was having headache issues, and they were concerned that maybe that there was something concussion-like. But then again, a headache is a case of there's not really a physical test for it. So, I mean, he could have been like, I'm out of here, but he wasn't going to leave Mobile. He was going to be around to be reevaluated. Now, something could have changed from that point of when the medical issues were there. But, in DeJuan's defense, it sounded like there was some sort of headache type of situation going on, but I digress.
I hold up my phone. It was a text from his agent telling him, remember we were watching that Holiday Bowl years ago there in Los Angeles before the OSU-Oregon Rose Bowl, and then Donkey Kong Sue had like 4 sacks in the first half, and Nebraska was up like 30-0. I think they were playing Arizona or somebody. And I said, if you hear that his agent has kidnapped him and driven him away from Jack Murphy Stadium as far as he possibly can, then you'll understand why. It's because he has nothing left to prove. So probably the same thing happened with DeJuan Jones. But the idea Ohio State's losing Johnson and Jones is very troubling because the tackles are the two players that must protect the quarterback in the drop back passing game. And you have a new quarterback, either Kyle McCord or Devin Brown are going to be back there. So any kind of help they get from those tackles is going to be important. It sounds like Donovan Jackson and Matthew Jones will stay at the guard positions. I had surmised that Matthew Jones would be in the running for center, and he still may be, but it sounds like it's Carson Hinsman, a freshman, who's going to get a run there. He'll be a redshirt freshman, I guess. And then also Victor Cutler, the transfer, and Jacob James, who's injured this spring, will not participate. I think those 3 guys and maybe Matthew Jones will be mixed in there some at center. And then outside, you're looking at Josh Fryer, Zim Michalski, perhaps Victor Cutler. There's one more name that they brought up that they really like. Oh, George Fitzpatrick, I think. So those are the guys that they're kind of looking at out there at the tackle positions. I think that's got to be somewhat troubling. Somebody on our board said we went from having 4 tackles in the starting lineup last year in 2021 to having none this year. I think that may be a little bit overly dramatic because Josh Fryer is a guy I think who could have played for anybody in the country this past year. So just couldn't get on the field at Ohio State because they had 2 outstanding tackles. But the offensive line, tremendous area of concern, I think, for Ohio State. And Justin Fry, Brian Hartline, Ryan Day going to mix and match there this spring to get it right.
So we've got a couple questions coming in. We'll put together as one here. So specifically, Mecca Hannah, thank you for the question here. Do you think Jordan Hancock is going to have a big year and more in totality? Lisa is asking, how much improved do you think the defense will be with the players added?
In terms of Jordan Hancock, I think he just needs to stay healthy and see what happens with that. I know they wanted him to contend for a starting spot last year with starters returning. They thought he was going to be that good, but he got the hamstring situation. He just couldn't shake it and was never able to fully develop as they wanted him to. So I think as long as he stays healthy, then there's every chance that he's going to be what they thought he was going to be. And he's not the first guy to battle injuries in his career. It's just, is he going to battle them and overcome them the way that, say, Marshawn Lattimore did? Or is he going to battle them and always deal with them the way Cam Brown did? And I'm not saying those are the only 2 options, but those are 2 examples of guys who dealt with injuries early on and then either overcame them and went pro way too early, like Marshawn Lattimore and was an all-pro, or Cam Brown just sticks around and continues to, just as a guy that is always injured. And so I think this is a big spring for Jordan Hancock, and it's going to be a big year for him. And just in terms of proving that he can stay healthy. And if he can prove he can stay healthy, then, who knows what the ceiling is for him.
I'll just throw in one of the comments that I read from Jim Knowles was that he said, and you have to understand that all these interviews were kind of happening simultaneously. So I never even went back where Jim Knowles was. I was up front with some of the other coaches at my station, I guess. But I did read some of the other comments, and he said that he now in his second year will be free to coach these guys a little bit harder because the relationships have been built, and they know it's not a personal thing when he tells them in no uncertain terms how things have to be. So I think that was only a positive thing, that he's taken the kid gloves off, and now there's going to be some real accountability and some harder coaching. And I think that can only help the bottom line, because this defense fell apart, at times in the two big games, Georgia and Michigan, and they can't have that happen again. So to me, I think that was only looked at as a positive and in a way that they're going to improve on defense.
Big tree top type question coming in from Mark. Basically, if I can summarize here through all of this, Ryan Day's got this season coming up. Do we think he's going to last outside of what he's done in the playoffs? I don't know if that's good or bad. I think his playoff resume could be interpreted both ways.
You can't say outside of the playoffs he's been, whatever. Like, you can't ignore the pinnacle of the sport and say, now judge him. You can't.
Yeah, he's been in the playoffs 3 of his 4 years as a head coach. I think they'll keep him. And not only that, the paradigm is about to shift. And I saw there was a question in there: is this the last year for the 4-team playoff? I think this is the last year of the 4-team playoff. They're going to go to the expanded playoff in the 2024 season. And based on everything we've seen from final rankings from Urban Meyer's first year in 2012 up through last year, they would have been in the top 12 at the end of the regular season every year. So, 9 out of 10 years going forward, if they're able to continue recruiting at the same level and don't have a scandal that, runs them out of playoff eligibility for a year or two or something, then they're going to be in the playoffs. And is he going to be judged going forward on how they do in the playoffs, or will what happens in the regular season with the Big Ten and Michigan continue to be such a big deal? I think in the future, I made a point on this in one of my chats, Alabama is going to win a national championship one of these upcoming seasons in a year where they lose to Auburn. It's going to happen. Ohio State could win a national championship in one of these upcoming seasons in a year where it loses to Michigan. It could happen. So how does that change how the head coach is viewed if Big Ten and regular season and wins over Michigan aren't the ultimate, where if you get hot in December and January and somehow eke out a national championship and earn the lifetime contract, I mean, how are you going to assess somebody at that point? I don't know. So I don't know how you want to come at it. I don't know how you get rid of a guy who's made the playoffs in a 4-team format 3 of his 4 years, but I'm sure you people will come up with something.
It's going to be a different world. You can go 12-0 and lose in the playoffs and be considered a bit of a failure by some, especially at a place like Ohio State, or you can go 10-2 and lose to Michigan and rebound and win a national championship, and all's forgotten.
Yeah, I mean, if Ohio State makes the field goal in the Peach Bowl and beats UGA and then goes on to play the same TCU team we saw, and transitive property doesn't work, you can't say that Ohio State is going to beat TCU by 40, 50 points. But I mean, we're like a play away from Ohio State going to the White House and all of that stuff. And this team was left for dead and they came back and did all this, but it didn't go the right way. And people want to sit there and say that Ryan Day needs to go and everything else. And, everybody has an opinion, and that's all well and good, but I can't agree with the opinion of people trying to sit there and see the exit strategy of what it's going to look like after getting rid of Ryan Day after this year. I mean, if Ohio State has the bottom drop out this year and ends up losing an unthinkable amount of games, which truthfully is about 2, what are people going to be saying then when we're doing this show 10 months from now, and if things don't get off to a good start and they stumble somehow against Notre Dame and what then, at that point, then I'll start entertaining more of the thoughts about, well, maybe Ryan Day isn't necessarily getting it done. But until then, I'm not buying it.
If you ask the average college football fan, has Ryan Day been successful in the college football playoffs, they would tell you no. When I look at it more from a performance standpoint and not just the results. And we know what happened in 2019 against Clemson, and we know the absurd calls in that game. We also know that they made a national championship game despite a lot of issues with COVID and injuries, and blew Clemson off the field before they were blown off the field by Alabama. And then we know what happened against Georgia, who was by far and away the best team in the sport, that it came down to one play and one kick at the end. So that's pretty good performance by and large through 4 games.
Yeah, and the super chat here about Ryan Day losing to Michigan for a 3rd year, and I'll let Steve answer this, but as I keep telling people, it depends on what else happens. Like if they're 11-1 in the regular season with the loss to Michigan, I don't care if it's a 4-touchdown loss. He's not going anywhere. It's not going to happen. Now, I do think in the playoffs with the 12 team, I don't think making the playoffs saves your job anymore once you go to 12 teams. Because for Ohio State, being in the top 12 is not good enough. And so I think there will be some issues moving forward if they don't get anywhere in the playoffs. I don't think simply making the NCAA tournament is no longer a thing that keeps you safe in theory. But go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I agree with Tony. You took the first sentence you said right out of my mouth, which is that their only loss, or is that on the end of a 4-loss season and there's issues throughout the program and turmoil and guys leaving, and stability is what wins, in my opinion. And you only have to look at the quality of the recruiting classes to understand that the talent is there. They've just got to coach up the talent and develop the talent, and put the talent in the right position to win games in the fall. And that's what they've done. I mean, they've done that, time and again with this coach and with, certainly, most of the previous coaches they've had there with Cooper and Tressel and Meyer, certainly. So to me, it took John Cooper after 98, where they finished 2nd in the country. It took a couple of down years. Actually, he did 99 in 2000 and even into 2001, 3 down years before they got rid of him. And there was a lot of turmoil in the program as well that kind of led to that as well. So with guys having issues off the field and an assault of one player against another and different things, that eventually led Andy Geiger to kind of pull the plug, on John Cooper, but he'd stopped winning. I mean, that was the big thing. I mean, after 98, he lost to Michigan 3 more times, 99 and 2000. He was out after 2000, so 2 more years is what he got. And, because Tressel was 01. So, yeah, they pulled the plug. And, not every time you pull the plug are you going to hit a home run. They hit one with Tressel. They hit one with Meyer. And, to this point so far, I'd say it's been a good ground rule double, or should I say a stand-up triple for Ryan Day so far? I don't know. But I don't want to invoke the third base reference and go down that path. But if he loses to Michigan the third straight time, there'll be a pocket of the fan base that definitely wants a change. There's no doubt about it, depending on what the ramifications are. If it costs them a playoff berth and a spot in the Big Ten championship game, going to be a lot of upset people, no doubt.
Donovan Jackson projected as a 2024 second round pick. Yakov 22, appreciate the contribution.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see. I mean, he's going to stay at left guard, and I think it's way too early to say that where these guys are going to be. And for a guy like Donovan Jackson, who had his ups and downs, I think he was maybe second team or first team All Big Ten. I think a lot of that was based on his name and his five-star status. This year, he needs to start being an award contender and the best guard in the country, especially since they're not at this point going to move him out. And if he is, then I think they should be shooting for a first-round pick out of him. But it would not be great to lose another 3-year guy to the NFL, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, he was a 5-star coming out of high school. Showed moments last year, showed moments of being kind of still a young guy last year. I don't get too caught up in a year all the way ahead type of drafts. Heck, I'm not really digging a lot of the 2023 drafts that I'm seeing right now. I mean, I still think that there's still too much with East-West Shrine game is tonight. I mean, you got the Senior Bowl. Of course, you have the Combine. You have the Pro Days and everything else. We'll know so much more then. I always like to kind of pencil out my own mock draft, like before everything happens, and then look at what, a later mock draft looks like. And it's not even close to being similar. But with Donovan Jackson, he certainly has the upside. Being an offensive guard, I mean, I think he's kind of capped with how high he can go in the draft, just because that's a position that is not one of the most talked about positions out there. I mean, certainly there are a lot of NFL teams you can talk to have been getting their quarterbacks killed. Chicago Bears that could probably use a lot of help at the position, but I think for all parties involved here, Ohio State fans should be hoping that Donovan Jackson sticks for the 4 years.
Mecca's asking, do you think Tegra Shabola can play tackle, if not this year, in the future?
You're muted, Steve.
He's going off without even paying attention.
Oh, sorry. That was a name I forgot. Tegra Tashbola. They mentioned him as well at tackle. George Fitzpatrick as well. Victor Cutler, Josh Fryer, Zim Machowski. There's 5 names for 2 spots. So I think out of that group, they'll find somebody who can play this spring. I don't have any doubt about that. And they're going to be tested, as much as JT Tuimoloau, Jack Sawyer, Caden Curry, everybody else at defensive end, as much as those guys are going to practice. That'll be interesting. One thing we didn't tackle, which we can, is the injuries. But if you guys have more on Tegra, go ahead, and then maybe we can get into an injury segment as well.
Well, I'd say they did move him from guard to tackle. Can he play? No idea. I think the fact that he played early last year and played as a true freshman at guard last year is a good sign that he can handle some things. So I think he's going to battle for a starting spot, but that's more about the depth chart issues as it is about how well he is or his potential. So can he play tackle? I don't even know if Ohio State knows that right now.
Deach is making the comment here: throughout the history of college football, has any head coach ever been handed a better program than Ryan Day when he took over Ohio State? And then he's got a number of other comments basically that Ryan Day has underachieved. So do you rate and evaluate the coach based on what he inherited, or do you rank and rate him just based on, okay, well, the board's clear, and now we evaluate you based on the way we would evaluate any coach?
I got one. Larry Coker at Miami inherited something there, won the championship in his first year, and then got all the way to the championship game against OSU the second year. So I'd say that's a pretty good one. Probably, again, circumstances like Miami, back there in the 80s, they changed coaches, what was it? They went like Schnellenberger, Jimmy Johnson, Erickson, blah, 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 through 3 or 4 coaches and several national championships. So, yeah,
Those coaches did. You could argue Lincoln Riley from Bob Stoops.
But
Oh, yeah. Although, yeah, no doubt.
I would say Urban Meyer handed Ryan Day a program whose quarterbacks were Tate Martell, Matthew Baldwin, and somebody else. So if Ryan Day takes over that program and doesn't bring his own quarterback, how highly are we viewing that program? Ryan Day's first 4 years have been better than Urban Meyer's last 4 years at Ohio State. The only difference is Urban Meyer was 4-0 against Michigan, and Ryan Day was 1-2. Michigan chose not to play in 2020, as we all know. The teams have been better than the 15, 16, 17, 18 teams. The 19 team is better than I'd say anybody, but I would have very high confidence of the 19 team playing the 2014 team. But also that's a team that was handed to Ryan Day from Urban Meyer, with the exception of Justin Fields. I think you're supposed to hand things off better than what you got them. So congratulations to Ryan Day for having that happen to him. But also Ryan Day has brought in so much of the talent. And again, you can just what is the record of Ohio State with Tate Martell or Matthew Baldwin starting in 2019?
Not very good.
That was Urban Meyer. That's what he left Ryan Day. And so Ryan Day had to go fix it.
I just don't think people would be really enthusiastic seeing an offense in today's football that is all predicated by read option, mostly Q run type of situations. It's, third in the world, and we're going to have to, we don't feel comfortable throwing the ball, and we're going to have to try and get it on the ground. I certainly think that Urban Meyer's personality and his record against Michigan and having a national championship, et cetera, certainly do a lot for his press clippings and the memory that people have. But then I think that when people sit there and start talking extensively about Urban Meyer, need to remember 2015 Michigan State game and some things along those lines. There certainly were some shortcomings. And, for the issues that Ryan Day has had, he hasn't been whacked by Purdue. He hasn't been whacked by Iowa. I mean, there haven't been those
Or Clemson.
So, in the year that they got just dismantled by Alabama in the national championship game, half the team was out with COVID. And I don't know if it would have necessarily changed the outcome of the game. It certainly would have changed how things went down. That was a really good Alabama team. And when you lose Trey Sermon on the opening series, et cetera, I just warn people to be careful of what they're wishing for, because there are not many Nick Sabans out there in the world that have been able to do it in, multiple scenarios out there. There are not a lot of coaches that have been able to do that. And yes, it sucks losing to Michigan twice. I get it. When I was an undergrad, they were 0-4-1 against Ohio State or against Michigan. I get that. Yeah, whatever. I understand it, but this team has been wildly successful. They're still a top 5, top 7 national recruiting class with only 20 players signed. There was no margin for error. Whoever the lowest kid was couldn't be dropped from the equation, because most of the equations go out to 20. So I don't know. It's going to be a long off season if all we can talk about is Ryan Day's perceived shortcomings.
And just real quick, people were tired of the running quarterback. They were so tired of it at the end of Urban Meyer's tenure and so was Urban Meyer, kind of to go and get Ryan Day and then commit to Dwayne Haskins. So like the idea that they needed somebody to take them to the next step in terms of a quarterback, because JT Barrett wasn't able to do it. And I don't know. Do people forget how upset they were that Ohio State couldn't throw the ball? And now that they can't throw the ball, they're upset that the quarterback won't run the ball. I think you just want to beat Michigan. If you just beat Michigan, everything is so much better. And nobody knows that better and more than Ryan Day.
Absolutely. David Greenshield, how optimistic should we be about the secondary?
I think very optimistic. I think Denzel Burke, is going to come back. This will be a contract year for him. He needs to play really well if he wants to jump off to the NFL as a 3-year starter at Ohio State. That'd be a pretty good body of work. He had a couple bad plays this past year, and he needs to have a great year. So I think that'll work for him. Davison Igbenison, the guy that we talked about earlier, is like a 6'1", 6'2" corner. Cam Brown didn't bring that kind of range or height. And so that could be an upgrade, or it'll be Jordan Hancock or Zaire Brown or, whoever steps in there at corner. So I think that's good. Safety, you got Josh Proctor back, and he was kind of a part-time guy this past year. You brought in Jihad Carter, so that's good. Who am I missing that's obvious?
Lathan Ransom.
Styles. Who was the other one?
Lathan Ransom.
Yeah, Lathan Ransom's back, and at times he played some good football, but again, got caught, against Michigan, got caught against Georgia, gave up some huge plays, and needs to play better. So, those experiences that he went through can only make him better going forward, that he won't fall for some of the things that he fell for this past year. And, again, I look at Perry Eliano. He's a really good football coach. I think he's going to get a lot out of them. And for Tim Walton, I mean, this is make or break for him. The corners have got to play much better this year. I mean, Denzel Burke regressed on his watch. And, if that was part Denzel Burke or, Tim Walton wasn't as good as the people they had coaching him prior, I don't know. I mean, he comes from the NFL after years in the NFL. You would think that, he would have the recipe on what it takes to put a quality corner on the field for a Division I Big Ten football team. But, there were just too many plays they gave up this past year. So, those guys are all in the clock. And I think that you do have to be cautiously optimistic. I mean, you lost a pretty good player with Ronnie Hickman. I think he was pretty good. Brown at least played. I mean, he was there, and at times he played pretty well. But, so I guess we'll have to see. Tanner McAllister was just kind of a plugger, and I think they can replace his contributions pretty easily. So, if Sonny Styles can come in and flash some things and change kind of the whole dynamic of the secondary, and they get back to being physical and athletic and being good, then yeah. So I think that the chances there to be much better.
And back to Kevin's final note about the recruiting class, also pretty impressive that it's number 3 in overall player rating, per player rating. So it's even higher when you look at the quality of the players coming in.
Yeah, and they're usually 2 or 3 around there every year. The number of players will fluctuate, but they're usually in the top 2 or 3 in terms of average recruiting star or ranking per recruit. So, and that's something that Ryan Day talks about as well and points to when people talk about the recruiting class. He likes to remind people that just because there's not 28 guys there doesn't mean the 20 aren't pretty good.
Tony, let folks know what you got going on this week.
Yeah, I actually just dropped an updated 2 Deep based on everything we heard yesterday. I've been running, started it, I don't know, maybe like January 2nd or something, projecting for 2023. And then every time something changes, somebody leaves or somebody joins the squad, I change it. So I think this is version 9.1 that I have now up at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Buckeye Weekly, we dropped an episode yesterday talking about just running through the positions about stuff that we heard on yesterday as well. So you can check that out on any of your podcast platforms of choice.
Kevin.
Yeah, still going through a lot of video from yesterday at Ohio State, so I don't really have any of my thoughts in order at this point. I have a feeling I'll be joining Tony and Tom Moore for a Friday live show, unless I'm the last one to know. And one of these days, I will get around to going through my way too early top 25. It just has not happened yet. But it's there. It's there. We'll get to it at some point. And of course, you can find me on Twitter at Kevin_new.
Steve.
Oh, just continuing to enjoy the winter weather here in Ohio. Very happy that, well, unhappy it'll be 20 degrees here tomorrow, but I guess next week we're going to be back up in the 50s. So that's a nice thing to deal with. But beyond that, just continuing my intrepid coverage of Ohio State men's basketball. Big game tonight with Wisconsin. Ohio State's lost 7 of their last 8 games, and Wisconsin's lost six of their last 7. So something's got to give, and the moment of truth has arrived downtown. It's either win and get back into this season, or as we used to say in high school when your basketball season was kind of going by the wayside, time for baseball.
We have dropped the links to Bucknuts and also Buckeye Huddle in the chat to make it easy for you folks to head on over there, check out Steve, Tony, and Kevin's work. Also, before we head out, Troy V, I did see some more work from you, Steve, concerning the targeting call in the Georgia game. Anything else to add to what you've researched there?
Well, that's something that's been percolating in my mind since the game ended. I mean, I immediately went in and asked the Peach Bowl guy, can we get a pool reporter to ask the referee what was the rationale for why they rescinded that? And, I can't tell you it was helmet to helmet. I can't tell you it was helmet to shoulder pad. Whatever it was, it knocked Ohio State's best player that day out of the game, or probably their co-best player along with CJ Stroud. So, and not only that, it changed the game, because instead of a 1st and goal at the 3-yard line, which they would have had the penalty being upheld, and they go ahead 18 points, 42-24 at that point, they kick a field goal. They're only up 14, and Georgia was able to overcome that and win the game by a point, 42-41. I've had a lot of Georgia people in my DMs saying, y'alls can't handle it, can you? Y'alls need to accept your loss, and whatever. And I said, no, y'alls need to understand and be happy you won the national championship, but just understand there was a team every bit as good as you this season in Ohio State. So, I kicked it up a notch. I went to the college football playoff PR people. They turned me on to the Pac-12 supervisor. He would not address the situation directly, would not discuss what the mechanics of the situation were in terms of who made the decision, where they were at, any of that. Got no satisfaction on that. Then I went to the Big Ten. I said, would your guy like to make a comment on this? Never heard back from Bill Carollo, which I understand he doesn't want to throw colleagues at other conferences under the bus. And if he doesn't do that, then he loses the support of, the Big Ten, because he didn't back the Big Ten. So he's in a real no-win situation there. So I understand him not wanting to say anything. Asked the NCAA. They said, that's the college football playoff. You need to talk to them. Well, I'd already done that. So finally got a hold of Steve Shaw, who is the overall guy in charge of, whatever this consortium is, Power 5, whatever, officiating, and emailed him. He never emailed me back. I wrote a column about it yesterday, and, he just basically said, I mean, does the credibility of your national championship, what if this is just, some call that it was a judgment call. Somebody had to make a judgment, and it went against Ohio State. It went for Georgia, and, Georgia went on and won the national championship. So that's it. But I think it's worth asking, what were the reasons why that judgment call went against Ohio State? And Ryan Day yesterday did say that he talked to Shaw, and Shaw, one of them said they didn't think it was a forcible enough hit, which is total bullshit. And the other one said that didn't think it was to the head, which it doesn't have to be the head, just needs to be the head or neck area. So, that's the long and short of it. I don't want to, take 20 minutes to go through everything, but that was in 3 minutes. There you go.
Maybe somewhere along the lines of communication in the moment, it dawned on somebody that, oh yeah, the SEC didn't win the other semifinal game. Could we possibly have a national championship game without the SEC? Okay.
Well, you get the Pac-12 involvement here. I mean, what the hell? The Big Ten just basically derailed put the Pac-12 out of business. I mean, are those people going to have jobs? Is that going to become Mountain West? I mean, what is that? So do they have an axe to grind in this whole thing? Because of USC and UCLA leaving the Pac-12 for the Big Ten? I mean, there's conspiracy theories with all this and, whatever.
Our buddy Jordan, who contributes over on the Clemson channel. Jordan, we love you. You know that. But Jordan says Ohio State has never lost a game. Jordan, we'll have to slice that up.
Jordan, Sean Wade got thrown out of the game for bumping into Trevor Lawrence. These guys took Marvin Harrison's head off and stayed in the game. Not only that, the one guy, Bullard, was named the defensive player of the game. And as I wrote, he also got his second national championship ring about it. So blow it out your ass.
I did like that after Steve asks that, Ryan Day is considering, like, how much do I want this fine to be? Do I want to fine? No, I'll just stay even keeled. And clearly he was not happy about it, though.
He looked at Jerry like, can I say something here or whatever? Like, I mean, coach, you're the coach. You can do what you want to do, but be ready for the fine that could come out. And I knew exactly. I sent internally. We have a text thread between most of the reporters. I said, how long until this is spun into something about Ryan Day pissing and moaning about the play, when it was a question that was asked point blank. So, it is what it is. And I can see people turning in the chat, and it is what it is. But you know what? You came into a chat that is meant for Ohio State people, and you're going to hear some things that are Ohio State centric. And if you can't deal with it, I'm sorry. But we love having you here.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. For Tony, for Kevin, for Steve, they are the best. We hope you appreciate what they do each and every week. We're pushing 200 shows consecutively here at the Voice of College Football. So lock it into their respective platforms and sites. Guys, we appreciate it. We hope to get back together next week.
Sounds good.
All right, guys, take care.